Welcome back to Cheeky Mare Stitches. We are doing the machine piece version of Pink Door Fabrics Queen of Diamonds, which is originally an EPP, an English paper piece pattern. I am doing blocks 1-1 and 1-2 today. Here is what Tula Pink's version looked like. It's a pretty simple block. There is one modification that I'm going to do, and that I'll show you here to make it easier to machine piece. The change that we will be making in the original one is with these diamonds here. My goal for machine piecing this pattern is to remove any need for Y seams. And in this hexagon shape here, the diamond shapes, the darker diamonds, are requiring you to do a Y seam. So instead of making that particular fabric 2 diamonds, I'm going to make that fabric out of 4 triangles that are the same size as these here. Here are my fabrics. As you can see, they're a little different than Tula Pink's fabrics. And that's because she wanted to use mostly her Besties collection, and I wanted to use more different fabrics. It is on the blue range, although I did add some more periwinkle to kind of match the periwinkle in the elephant print. And then I also used this blue and pink dot to kind of bring in some of the pink in the flowers. So as you can see, I made in the original pattern, this space right here would have been made up of a same size diamond as this, but I wanted to get rid of that Y seam, so I have made it into two triangles of the same color, and when I sew it together, it'll be hardly noticeable that this was originally supposed to be one piece. Basically now we can just sew these in rows. This one first to this one, and then probably these two to this one. This row together, this row together, this row, and that last diamond row. And it's a pretty straightforward block that way. I did fussy cut these stripes, so I want to line them up as best I can when I'm sewing my seam. We'll probably go over how to do that a little bit with the paper pieces. You can see the lineup and it's easier to do, but with machine piecing, if you don't cut it just right, there's a little bit more probability that you'll need to fudge it a little bit. And I did fussy cut these dots here so that this dot was centered in all of these. So you'll want to make sure, if you do that, you'll want to make sure that they're all going in the same or similar orientation. All right, so now that we've seen the layout, let's head over to the sewing machine. All right. So I just wanted to mention I am not sponsored by Quilting Is My Therapy or Crimson Tate. I just like those two companies quite a bit. Block 1-1. The first, so we're going to go row by row with that. And with the engineered corners with the templates, we can just line these up. And we need to adjust our seam allowance to be 3/8 of an inch. Okay. And we just sew these row by row, which is fairly easy for the first few because it's just the pieces together here. All right, there's one. All right, the next row is one of the, what do you call it? Trapezoids, and 2 of the dots here. And it doesn't matter which order you sew them in. So I'm going to do that. right. And this can go on top of there. And the engineered corners line up so nicely. Okay, there's that. The next row is where we're using our modified. We might want to lay out the block here because of how the stripes are fussy cut. So I'm lining up the next 2 rows currently, but I won't sew them together at the same time, but I want to make sure that my stripes line up. And then here are our modified pieces. These in the original drawing would be diamonds, but because we don't want any Y seams, we cut them in half. All right, so here is the next row. Okay. One of these first. And if I were making a bunch of these blocks at the same time, I would probably chain piece them. But because this is a sampler quilt, I'm only going to do one at a time. All right. Now, I would normally put this on here next, but I'm going to do the second one of these just because I can look at it, make sure, and it's easier to keep all the pieces organized that way. Okay, so there are the 2 rows that are modified because these are now cut in half instead of being diamonds with Y seams. So now I'm going to sew these together, and I am going to pin these because the stripes are going to be a pain in the butt. And because it's on the bias, because this edge is on the bias, I can manipulate it a little bit. And I'm going to actually fold this. I'm going to nest my seams here a little bit. Try and get some points to match. So see how those seams are nested. Put a pin there. And it's okay if this part isn't lined up, because it's within the 1/4 inch. So I'd rather have my seams nested than have the ends exactly right. So now I'm going to manipulate this fabric a little bit to get my stripes to line up. Nest this seam here. We need to shift this a little bit. And any fullness that my bias stretching will cause, it'll be okay. It'll quilt out. I'm going to nest these seams here. Pin that. Okay. And then we'll move the stripes over a little bit and pin those. Now we should be good to sew. I'm making sure as I'm sewing the stripes that they line up pretty well. And we'll see if my fussy cutting worked. Fold that open. All right, so I had to rip out because my points didn't match, and I forgot one thing to make sure happened. Like sometimes you have to choose what you're trying to line up, and so there's going to be a little bit of missing steps on occasion. So you have to choose your priority, and my priority is going to be the points of these triangles here lining up. So, and I forgot about that when I sewed it the first time. So I'm going to now sew it and try to get the stripes to line up as best I can. But I'm going to make sure that I hit the point where the triangle, where the two stitches that make up the triangle line up, so that I don't cut off any of my points. Even if I have to take a little bit smaller seam than I normally would. I'd rather have the point than have the exact right size seam. And there we go. And the stripes aren't lined up all the way on one side, but on the other side it's pretty good. Okay. So I didn't fussy cut quite the stripes quite well enough, and if I had been English paper piecing this, it would have been fine, but because I'm machine piecing it, it's a little wonky. But it looks pretty good, and I'm going to keep that. Close enough is good enough. All right. If I really wanted to, I'd probably recut this piece here and make it line up a little bit better, but I'm not going to worry too much about it. No one's going to notice it once it's in the quilt. So now I can just use the engineered pieces, engineered corners. All right, now it's time for the next row, now that we've figured out the center here. And this is what the row is comprised of. And we'll go ahead and stitch that. And we'll put the last two pieces on for the bottom of the block. And now we're going to put the bottom of the block onto the rest of it. And when we do that, we're going to watch our engineered corners. And we can use the engineered corners of the last row to kind of see where we are going to line up so we don't lose our triangle points. And there we go. Here is block 1-1 done. And I will insert a picture here of the finished block when it's all pressed and laid flat. And now we're ready for block 1-2. Here's the Tula pink version. And as you can see here, she has done an excessive amount of fussy cutting. Each one of these rabbits consists of two separate pieces that have been brought in, because in English paper piecing, the convex angle, this one right here, is almost impossible. I mean, it's impossible to do. So she has fussy cut those rabbits in the extreme to create a different shape and to focus the different shape with the fussy cutting. And I'm going to do that today. So I'm going to show you how to do that with the rabbits. And then, because I'm trying to do this with machine piecing, we're going to have to adapt the diamonds here to also be 2 pieces. And I do not have the fabric that that is shown here, but I have a fabric that's similar, and I will show you how I fussy cut those as well. Here is the original, what the original block looked like. And as you can see, these diamonds here are 1 piece in the original. And again, we're going to be cutting those in half. So in the pattern, the dark blue diamonds shown in the original is made up of template F. And template F is the double of template C. So if you put 2 C's together, you will get an F. So that's what I'll be doing. Instead of using this template to get the dark diamonds, I will be using 2 template C's. So in the pattern, it says you need a certain number of template F, but I'm using double that with template C. All right, so my fabrics for those diamonds, my fabric for this diamond is this one. And I have fussy cut the shape. So if I show the fabric that I cut it out of here, and it's like this fabric was made for fussy cutting to get different looks with one piece of fabric. So like I said, in the original pattern, template F would have been the correct shape, and these diamonds fit perfectly within there. So if I wasn't machine piecing these, I would just center the seam line, which is the line all the way around. Would center the diamond in the seam line and then cut. Well, because I'm machine piecing this, I need to make it a little bit more difficult. And I'm going to use template C. And I need this diamond here. And I've got some that are kind of already ready to go. So this technique is a little bit more wasteful. If you do not want to be as wasteful as I am, see, I had to skip. So this diamond right here is completely wasted because I had to skip to fussy cut this. If you do not want to be that wasteful, just get a solid like it's shown in the original and cut double the amount of these. Okay, so the first thing you do is you figure out what you're going to fussy cut, and I've decided to fussy cut this diamond here. And then I am going to line up the seam line of the base of the triangle. This is the point and this is the base. I'm going to line up the seam line shown on that, on the center of the diamond. So the seam line is going to go straight across all of these points right here. And the other thing I make sure is that there's an equal number of space between the seam line and this turquoise color. I'm lining the points up with the points of this diamond here, and I'm lining the edge of the template up with these 2 triangles down here. Now I'm going to cut. Okay, so there's my triangle. Now to get the other half of the diamond, I have to find a repeat of that diamond, just down here. It's this one right here. I have to find a repeat of that diamond, and I did the bottom one first. So now I am going to do the opposite of that, turn it around, but the same principles apply. I'm going to line the seam line to the points of the middle of the diamond. I'm going to make sure that there's equal spacing. I'm going to line up the engineered edge onto the two triangles up there and then cut. And then there we go. So to get the 8 diamonds that I needed for this particular fussy cut, I needed to cut up 16 diamonds with different focus. So this one, the top is focused, and this one, the bottom is focused. This one's the top is focused. This one, the bottom is focused. And there are 4 of each of those. So it is a little wasteful, but I think it'll do a really neat effect and make machine piecing it a little bit easier instead of doing Y seams. Now, if you like Y seams, then go ahead, do the Y seams. But I'm not a fan. All right, so next I'm going to show you how I fussy cut to get the concave pieces, to get the concave look of these bunnies here. All right, so these bunnies are going to be pieced together, really super fussy cut again. And if you don't want to do this fussy cutting, just pick, another print to cut this shape out of, and just follow the sub block assemblies that I'll be showing here in a minute on how to arrange this in Machine Piece World. Anyway, so those are 3 of the 4 bunnies that I need. I need one that's kind of laying down, or what they call loafing. This is what they call loafing because they look like a loaf of bread. We need it where the body is on this side. All right, so I'm going to move these out of the way. So we need the body on the left side. And to do this technique, you're going to need 2 of those. So here is one. Here's one. And I need one where the ears are fully seen. So here's another one. Okay, so this one will be our top rabbit, and this one will be our bottom rabbit. So I'm going to do the top one first. We're going to use this template here, and we want the point to be up. So it's going to be kind of upside down, and I'm trying to include the moon in my fussy cut because I like moons. All right, so that will be my first one. All right, so there's my first squished pentagon. All right, so now I'm going to take the seam line here, going to line it up on the bottom so it's upside down, and I'm going to draw a line at that line. And you may not be able to see it, but I can see it. So that's what it should look like. Now I take my repeat here, and that one may not work because I may not have enough. All right, so we have our top piece with our line drawn for the seam allowance. And now we need to get the bottom of that rabbit, of the bunny. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find another bunny that is the same repeat, which is this one right here. And I'm going to line up my piece so that it blends in with the background. Okay. Then I'm going to turn around. So this is the way I cut the first piece. I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to lay it down so that the edge that I cut is lined up with the edge of the template. And then I'm going to lift it up and slide it up without moving left to right and place the seam line on that line that I drew. Okay. And then I'm going to lift up by putting a lot of weight on this side so that it stays in place but gives some leverage so that I can take out my previous cut piece, just like that. And then I'll cut all the way around. So let's do this without the fabric so you can kind of see what I'm doing. All right, so pretend this is my fabric that I want to cut. That is the rabbits. And I've lined it up so that you can't see it anymore, like that it's blended in so that we can see the template. I'm using this fabric so you can see it. All right, so I cut it like this. Now I'm turning it 180. I'm lining up the corners of the template with the corners of the cut piece. And that's the way it is. I'm lifting up a little bit, sliding up so that it doesn't move side to side, and lining the seam line with the drawn line that I did, that I put on there. I'm pushing down in the corner here so that it stays in place, but gives me enough leverage that I can just move that out of the way. And now I can cut all the way around. So let's go back to the original. I'm going to find my bunny, which is this one. We're going to line it up so that it disappears into the background. Just like that. Line up the points, which you probably can't see, but I can see. Lift up, move so that the seam line is overlapping the drawn line. Move out and cut. There we go. All right, so here's the layout, or at least most of it, and I know it's a jumbled mess. So I am going to use the original diagram to show you my thought process here. So here is the original diagram, and what are my goals for cutting this up manageable pieces without Y-seams? And it's a little bit of a cluster here. So let's start with the easiest ones. And in my opinion, the easiest shapes to start with are these triangles here that are made up of this pentagon, this kite, this kite, this kite, and half of these two triangles, or half of these two diamonds, so triangles in our example. So let's go back to my layout. What pieces does that correspond with? This one up here, this one, and these three pieces. So I'm going to put those together in a subassembly. And you'll have to excuse me. I'm an engineering draftsman. That is what we call a sub-block, is subassembly. All right. So now that's giving us this block right here, this subassembly right here, is giving us no Y-seams, which means that same subassembly down here will give us no Y-seams. So we're going to group those together. Okay. And we will address how we put the subassembly together after we just get all the subassemblies together. All right. So now let's go back to the original. Okay. So we've crossed off those two sections, where else can we accomplish a non-Y seam? So I look for horizontal lines that can be made, and with our half diamond triangles, here is the next horizontal line that can be made. And it is a little bit weird because of the kites in the middle there. But so the next thing I look for are kind of diagonal seams that go all the way across the row. So these right here are the diagonal seams that can go all the way across the row. Go back to our layout and see what that comprises of. That comprises of, so here, this subassembly has already been put together. So we need the bottom of those diamonds that were in the other assembly. These kites here. The bottom of our fussy cut rabbit. And the top of our next fussy cut rabbit. The tops of these diamonds. And the blues. Oops. Alright, so those are our next subassembly. And that means the same is true for the bottom. So these, the top of this rabbit, the bottom of the next one, and the bottoms with our diamond shapes. I think those are our kite shapes, which I think those are the right ones. No, these are the right ones. All right, I fussy cut the shapes, so I just wanted to make sure I got the right ones here. So this is a subassembly. All right. And then the last subassembly, again, let's go back to the original. What are we looking for? We're looking for horizontal rows. And here's the last horizontal rows with so it's the two different trapezoids here and here. The two diamonds cut in half here and here. And the two pentagons and the two kites. And those are that's a horizontal row that can be made with the adaptation of the diamonds. And now let's look and see if we can find some diagonal lines that go across, which would be kind of like vertical lines if these were squares. And here those are. So excellent. We're not going to have any Y seams. And so now we go back to our layout, and these are our final subassemblies. All right, so now that we've figured out our subassemblies, let's go to the sewing machine. All right, so now we're going to work on sewing up the subassemblies for block 1.2. And I have the first one here. It is, and remember, we are looking to find, we're trying not to get Y seams. So we can't put things together like in rows, because this has a point here. This block has a point, so if we put these two on at the same time, then this is going to have to be a Y seam, which we don't want to do. So what are we looking for? We're looking for straight lines that go across the entire block or pieces of the entire block. So if I remove these triangles right now, is there a straight line that goes across the entire row? And yes, there are. This line right here. So these are going to be the first two pieces that we sew together, the first two sub-assemblies of this subassembly. So let's do that. All right, so now we have straight lines that go all the way across the subassembly. And now we can add this triangle on because it's not going to interfere with this piece. But we can't add this triangle on yet because this side right here has an opening. So if we wanted to put the triangles on all at the same time, we could put this side together. And I'm lining up, see where the engineered corner meets up with the seam line of the other side, lining those up. And look, that matches really well. Now we're going to put on the triangles. And if you've fussy cut, make sure that you know which side is up. So for me, purple is always up. So I know that I have the correct piece over there. And I want to look, so you can see the line I drew when I was fussy cutting. And I want to see if that line, because this is the seam allowance, I want to see if that line goes all the way across and goes through the points, and it does. So that means that the likelihood of me matching up my seam is pretty good when I put the next row on, the next subassembly. So purple is up, so it's going to go over here. Same thing, I can look across and see if it's a pretty straight line. And it's not perfect, but it's a pretty straight line. So there is subassembly 1 for block 1.2. The next subassembly that I've done is just the mirror image. It's the bottom part of the block. So we should be comfortable with that. Green is down, and since this is pointing down, we should know that those are in the correct orientation. Again, we need to look for the straight line, and with the seam allowance accounted for, those are the straight lines. So we're going to sew those on. Jinkies, feel comfortable. And with these pieces, I'm always pressing towards the purple or the periwinkle kite here so that my seams, they won't nest, but they will be a little less bulky. And I can use the engineered corners to kind of line up my seam if it wasn't quite cut. Probably. And there we go. The points line up pretty well. All right. Green is down. So I want to make sure my green is in the right position. And it is. And there is the bottom subassembly. Looking pretty good. Okay, now you want to make sure you grab the right one. We're going to start with the next row after this because we've super fussy cut the rabbits. So we want to make sure we have the correct rabbit for our subassembly. And this is the correct rabbit, so we know we have the correct subassembly. And we want to look for, this isn't the right triangle because the dots, so the dots need to go over here. Okay, so we want to make sure that it looks right. I'm looking for I've alternated the diamonds. So I'm looking for the diamond, the bottom of this diamond without dots over here, which I have, and the bottom of this diamond over here, which I have. And then I've alternated, so the top of the next diamond should be over here, which it is. This is the correct layout. Okay. So again, what are we looking for? We're looking for horizontal lines that we can make, which are these up here. So we've made those already. What's the next thing we're looking for? We're looking for diagonal lines that we can make without doing a Y seam. So this is going to be very similar. So I'm gonna that go all the way across. So we could do it like this, and which would be very similar to how we made this assembly. Or we could do it like this, because these go all the way across. It's up to you. I'm going to do this way, I believe. And so we need to do this diagonal seam first. So then we can put these on. So then we can put these on. Okay? So that's what we're looking for when we're making decisions. Is there a way for me to make a sub seam without cutting across another block? And if I did have to cut across, like in the diamonds in the original block, I have to cut two of those, two pieces, make it a two-piece block. Hopefully that makes sense. So let's sew these on. Make sure my bunnies are right side up, and they are. I'm going to line up the engineered corners from the previous seam to get my kites to be the right. And they do pretty well. All right, so now I've got a hexagon. Now I can put these triangles on to make my horizontal or my diagonal lines across the subassembly. And green is down, so I'm making sure that that's pointed down. Purple is up, so I'm making sure purple is up. It looks pretty good. Now I can make these subassemblies so that the diagonal line goes appropriately. Purple is up. Bring it down. Okay. Now we've got those straight lines across there. Excellent. So now we should be able to line these up. Checking my engineered corners with the previous seam. Make sure those line up. They do. Might match pretty well. Line up my engineered seam in the back. Or engineered point in the back to my point here. All right, some straight horizontal seams right there. That looks nice. Let's put the top on here. This is where we're going to see if we've cut these well. And we can probably nest these seams. So I'm going to do the opposite. Fold those seams back there. And when we look here, we're going to try and line up the points here and here so that they match pretty well. If you want to, you can do a pin. So I put the pin in where the point is on the back. Then I go straight through there and put the pin in where the point is there. I can line up my engineered seams. It needs to be straight up and down. Line up the corner. The engineered corner doesn't necessarily have to match up as long as it's within 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to be okay with that because then it's in the seam allowance. I'm using my seams to nest for the bunny. Now I'm going to go over here and do the same little trick. Put my pin in the point my pin in the point, and then in it. All right, let's try and see if we've lined up our bunnies and our fussy cutting. And because I know that that point is where I'm aiming for the seam, I'm gonna try and hit those points with my needle. And from the back, it looks pretty good. The bunny's not quite lined up, but the diamonds are pretty lined up. I think that's gonna be good enough for me. It's gonna get the effect I want. All right. My points are pretty well lined up on the diamonds. They're not perfect. It's pretty close. I'm worried more about the diamonds because those are straight lines, whereas the bunny's an organic shape. So if it's not perfect, it's going to be they're not going to notice it a whole lot. And don't do what I'm doing if you want to try and win a show. My quilts are not show quilts. My quilts are for me and for gifts. All right, so the next assembly is the opposite one of this. So we want to use this bunny to help us set it up. Purple's up, and we're trying to match the diamonds that we've got. The bunny is the loaf bunny with the body on the left. Let's not this one's bottom. Make sure the purple's on top. Almost did that backwards. And that bunny there. And those there. That looks correct. Right? Yes. Okay. So here's our next subassembly. It is the mirror image of the last one we did. So we did this as our subassemblies. So that worked pretty well. Let's do it again. This is what we're gonna do. All right, so let's do that. All right, I made a parallelogram instead of part of a diamond. So this seam is wrong here. And I mistakenly thought that seam was wrong. But yeah, it is what it is. Get to see the real life process here. Okay. So this needs to go like this, and this needs to go like that to make the upside down the part of the diamond. All right. All right, let's try this again. There we go. That's the horizontal lines that I needed, or the diagonal lines that I needed. All right, so now we're lining up bunnies and diamonds again. And I'm going to nest the seams. the most pinning I've done on a block in a long time. There we go. It's pretty well matched up. Close enough for me anyway. So now let's move on to the next subassembly. All right, so the next assembly is the middle. So I'm going to use both of my previous assemblies to figure out the order. So here are the pieces for the assembly, subassembly. And again, we're trying to find, we've found these horizontal lines. So that's the first thing, that's how we got the rows cut up. Now we're going to try and find some diagonal lines that go all the way across, which are these. And so this now needs to figure out a subassembly order, just very similar to the previous one. So these. And hopefully you can see the diagonal lines there that we're creating so that we can have straight seams instead of Y seams. So let's put the bunnies together first. Again, we're lining up the engineered corner with the seam. It's going to give us a kind of nested seam. It's not actually nested, but it's kind of nested. That's good. I need to do those lines or triangles. There's that assembly. Let's do this one next. We're going to put the hexagon together and then add the triangle. Let's make sure I'm that's where it has to go. Let's down. I just want to remind you that we're using 8 seam lines. If you're using the templates, you can put that one on, because it's not this one. Lining up the engineer corner with the previous seam. There we go. Now we need to make this hexagon. All right, there's the center section. Now we can add on the top section, doing similar things to the previous two sections when we're matching the fussy cuts. So we'll pin at the intersections, do nesting seams where we can, nesting seams where we can. All right, so this bunny isn't quite perfect. He looks a little angry, but it's close enough. And I could have just made a cutting error, but the diamonds are pretty close. So let's put on the bottom here. Again, I'm not trying to show you how to make a perfect show quilt. I'm trying to show you how to try new things and get the concept of new things with maybe not exactly perfect execution, but to also show you that if you don't get perfect execution, that's okay too. Don't get overly frustrated with trying to be perfect. Try to be as perfect as you can. You know, there are a few seams that I would rip out again and see if I can't get a better fit. But if you've ripped out 4 or 5 times and it's close enough and you're not trying to put this in a show, just tell yourself that you did as best you could now, and the next time you try to do it, you'll be better. A lot of people I know just get too frustrated with it not being perfect the very first time that you've done it. Like I've done one or two seams like I did with the Rottweiler in the video that I'll link up to here, up here. But, you know, one seam where you're not trying to match 3 different things that are fussy cut is a little different than doing 3 different seams that you're trying to fussy cut and line up sewing. So give yourself some grace and let go of some of the perfectionism that some people have. For now, you know, you want to get better as you get going. So the more, we're going to do some more of this super fussy cutting in the next few videos. But I want to encourage you to try it. And that bunny is not bad either. I may rip it out and try to shift it over just a little bit, tug on the bias here a little bit and kind of, but it's, I mean, when you look at it from far away, they don't look too bad. I may just leave it. Practice what I preach. All right, there's block 1.1 and 1.2 done. We are perfecting our super fussy cutting. And again, just the point of this video is to show you the sub-assemblies and the process in my brain, how I decided to make it easier to machine piece this block. So thank you for watching Cheeky Mare Stitches. Please like, subscribe, comment if you have any requests on seeing something again, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.